today's plug, which I don't get paid for at all, actually, and as you guys might have seen in some of my earlier videos, I do like to recommend books and other products, which again I don't get paid for, that I really like. And today's particular book is The Vitamin D Solution by Michael F. Holick, and it is a fantastic book. The main takeaway that I took away from this book was that 90% of people around the world are vitamin D deficient, and vitamin D is actually a hormone that regulates a whole bunch of different things in your body, and it's a key factor for repelling cancer and staying happy, i.e. not having depression. So what you guys can do, if you're interested, you can go to your local clinic and get a 25 hydroxy D vitamin D test, which is the most accurate way to measure vitamin D, and you guys should be anywhere from like 40 nlg to like 80, 90. So you guys should do that. And if you have loved ones who might be suffering from depression or whatever, have them get their vitamin D levels checked. Seriously, Michael F. Holick is the man. That's it for today's promotion for books. Hi you guys, I'm Cheyenne Adamson, and welcome back to the YesPhonics channel, where homeschoolers, teachers, and educators everywhere come for valuable teaching information and insights. Sometimes the best way to handle a possible learning problem is to simply change your course when you have to. And there's a few possible scenarios where this is possible, unless you're just homeschooling or in a small private school. In the last video called How to Teach Language Arts to the Struggling Reader, I talked about expectations of the teacher and the student. And there is a direct link to expectations and label. And by label, I mean some sort of description about the child's learning situation, whether it's ADD or ADHD, learning disabled, or handicapped in some way that might affect the learning process. We have to think about how labels play into expectations, because when a child has a label, it has a direct effect upon how the teacher looks at and treats a student. And labels are often seen as a good thing, and sometimes parents spend precious time trying to get the school to see that their child has a problem. The interesting thing about doing research on labeling children is that there are contradictions all over the place. And some websites say that labeling doesn't do any harm, and some say the opposite. And even formal studies contradict each other. So what should we believe? It's complicated because every situation and learner is different, and we can't speak in generalities. We're going to talk a little bit about my fellow colleague, who I like to talk about a lot actually, is Pam Fink. And she did a phone interview with her sister, who happens to teach in a public middle school in central Pennsylvania. Now, Pam Fink's sister says that it's impossible not to treat a child a certain way when they have a label. May sound simplistic, right? But let's talk about this a little bit more. Her students don't actually like labels, but they do like and want the help that comes with them. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. You know, you have a label put on you, you have some bad things happen, but you also get some attention and maybe even some solutions to your problem, but it comes with that burden of being labeled when you didn't even want to be labeled necessarily. When a child has a severe enough learning disability to have an IEP, which is an individualized education plan, there's a ton of help. But there is something called inclusion by law, which is most often referred to by the government as LRE, or least restricted environment. But teachers use the term inclusion. And because of inclusion, a child with an individualized education plan is supposed to have everything read to him or her if they struggle with reading. Now, these students are mainstreamed into a regular classroom, and they have to have an aid. Even though inclusion is supposed to help the learning disabled to fit in with regular kids, which is, I guess, termed as the least restrictive environment, it's obvious to everyone that they don't fit, and it definitely does cause problems. And in addition to this situation, there's another story that's going on at least in Pennsylvania. And there is one time when teachers are actually not allowed to read to and for the IEP student, which is during the PSSAs. And this is Pennsylvania's standardized test like the AIMS in Arizona. And by the by, Arizona recently changed this particular acronym to the AZ Merit, or Arizona Merit. Now, there are students who get read to all year by the teacher until the PSSAs. And it seems unfair for the student, and it brings the school's overall average down on the test. And this is definitely, in my thinking, of what we'd call a lose-lose situation. The issue of labels is complicated. Saying that labels can hurt children, it isn't exactly true. And saying that labeling a child's disabilities or learning problems are a tremendous help to children may not be true in all cases either. So where do we stand on this, and where do we go? And what we can conclude about labeling children for educational purposes is this: proceed slowly and exhaust as many avenues as you can before going for a label. And children, they learn in all sorts of different ways, and be willing to change what you're doing to reflect those particular needs for children. And as always, there's a ton of resources and help available to you, including my channel. In the event that the child doesn't necessarily have a learning disability, but they get labeled, all sorts of dire consequences can happen. Prescribing them some sort of pharmaceutical drug that they might not necessarily need at all, which can wreak all sorts of havoc on their mental and emotional well-being, especially when they didn't even need the drug or the label in the first place. Try to get involved as much as you can in the child's life and learn about their past history and talk to their parents. And that's it for today's video, you guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or concerns, or as always, if you think I'm off base, or if you think the video's right on point, feel free to give us a like, throw a comment in there. I'd love to start a discussion with you folks. And until next time, my fellow educators, be well and stay classy.